Good day, America. From Houston, Texas, I'm Colonel Roy Morales, exposing the truth from City Hall to the state capitol to the White House. I want to remind viewers that on April 21st, 2012, Harris County Republicans and Democrats will be conducting their senatorial conventions. Republicans will be meeting at Grace Community Church on the Gulf Freeway, and Democrats will be meeting within their own senatorial districts. On today's show, I'm honored to have our first candidate for Harris County Sheriff, former Marine Carl Pittman. We're going to be right back. We're going to take a short break. I'm Roy Morales. Welcome back to We the People. I'm Roy Morales, and today we're very fortunate to have our first candidate for Harris County Sheriff, the former Marine, Carl Pittman. Now, Carl claims that he is the only candidate that can beat Adrian Garcia, and we're going to see why he thinks that on today's program. Carl, welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
Carl, to begin today's interview, first, I want to thank you for serving our country as a United States Marine.
Well, you're very welcome. I've always considered serving my country as the absolute right thing to do. You know, we take that oath that you took also to protect and defend the Constitution of this great country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Exactly. And that's a very, very important thing that I think we have to continue to do.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think you're taking another step, not your first step, but another step in protecting and defending the Constitution, which is really we the people. But what I want to ask you, Carl, is what do you think the voters want to know about you? They need to be comfortable and they need to be confident when they go to the polls during early vote and election day to vote for Carl Pittman.
I think what the voters need to know is they're electing a sheriff that is absolutely committed to the job, that is more important to him, to me, in doing the job than worried about keeping the job. And first and foremost, protecting this county as its constitutional protector. The sheriff is the highest elected law enforcement officer in the county, and that is what I intend to do, is to protect and serve, but to protect the Constitution and your constitutional rights.
Why did you get into this race? I think it's always important to find out from the candidate, why are you running? Well,
you know, so often what I've seen and what I have seen with the sheriff's office is there is a fundamental lack of leadership. And I understand it as a combat-trained Marine, as a business owner, as a veteran law enforcement officer. Nothing works well without leadership. And so I know I will bring leadership and commitment, and more importantly, I know I can be and will be the sheriff to every single community in this county.
Well, I think what's important is that I think the voters of Harris County need to learn a little bit more about Adrian Garcia. We know that he was an HPD officer, but we also, a lot of people tend to forget that he used to be on the street, but then he got moved to one of the mayor's task force. And I'd like to know why that occurred. There's a lot of stories out there, and I'm sure the voters are going to find out more about that as we continue with this campaign. But I think it's very important to know about both candidates. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen about Carl Pittman, reading about you on your website, it's a lot of good things that you've done for this country and for your community, not only here but within California as well when you were stationed there. Speaking of website, what is your website?
Website is carlforsheriff.com. That's carlforsheriff.com.
That's a very good website. And with that, we're going to go to a commercial break. I'm Roy Morales with We the People. Don't touch that remote. Welcome back to We the People. I'm Colonel Roy Morales with one of the candidates for sheriff for Harris County, the third largest county in the country, I believe.
Well, you know, I've had a little bit of a disagreement about that with my good friend out in Arizona, Joe Arpaio. He says he's number 3, but until I'm elected, I'll let him hang on to number 3.
Well, speaking about that good sheriff out of Arizona, Sheriff Arpaio, who has endorsed you for this race?
Well, Sheriff Joe Arpaio has endorsed me. He endorsed me last year. In fact, he came back during June of last year for a big event up in Humble, and I am very honored to have Sheriff Arpaio's endorsement, because I think, as everyone is aware, this man absolutely stands up for what he believes in, and he enforces the law, and that's exactly what I'll do as Sheriff of Harris County.
What other elected officials have endorsed you to this point?
I have been endorsed by 4 of the senatorial district chairs of the 7 here in Harris County. I have been endorsed by 8 of the state senatorial Republican executive committee members, and probably approximately 70 other precinct chairs. And that's a pretty good chunk of what's there.
That's a very good accomplishment for a short time here. Campaigning, it usually takes a while, but congratulate you on all that work, because you have to reach out and you have to talk to these individuals and convince them that you're the right candidate, and you've already started. But also heard you got a very important endorsement the other day from a former elected official. That would be former City Council member Larry McCaskill.
Yes, I surely did. It was a real treat to meet with Mr. McCaskill and have him share some of his very long experience with the landscape, political landscape here in Harris County and in Houston, and so I am very honored to have that endorsement. Well,
I also understand you've got the endorsement from one of Houston's billionaires, Mr. Lee Cook.
That's another absolute thrill to have Mr. Cook's endorsement. You know, when you can say that you have the support of someone who was involved in the Manhattan Project and that started in the business with Bing Crosby, that's saying a lot. And so I feel very, very honored again to have Mr. Cook's endorsement also.
Well, I hear there's more elected officials that are going to be endorsing you soon, so we're going to have to just keep looking at your website and see what those prizes are. But with that, let's get to some really important items. The 3 to 4 issues that really concern Carl Pittman about Harris County.
Well, first and foremost is public safety. That's the very reason why the law enforcement exists. And if we're not doing that well, I'm not quite sure what we should be doing. So it concerns me because we have so many officials who, again, are more concerned with keeping their jobs than doing their jobs. And that is not what the people deserve. The people deserve someone dedicated to the profession of law enforcement. That is what I do. I'm not a reserve officer. I'm a full-time professional peace officer. And that is what I bring to the table. I'm committed to doing this job every day. And I think it's important that the citizens of Harris County recognize that they have a professional law enforcement officer who is looking to keep them safe.
Well, I think another hot topic in this county for years has been illegal immigration. And you and I have talked about that, about some of the serious conditions here, about individuals driving on the streets, being involved with accidents, not having the proper documentation. And our current sheriff really doesn't do anything about that. Can you tell me a little bit what Carl wants to do?
Well, I tell you what I will do as sheriff. I will not handcuff my deputies by having them stop anyone who has no driver's license, no registration, no insurance, no other licensed occupant in the vehicle, and write that person a citation and send them down the street. Because what we ultimately have to consider, what is the best public policy? And the best public policy is to get uninsured, unlicensed drivers off the street, regardless of where they're from. So that means we, of course, we're responsible for getting that driver somewhere safe, but that car will be towed off the roadway under my administration.
And we're going to touch a little bit on towing in a second, because I heard you got another endorsement from a group, but we're going to talk about that when I come back from break. This is Roy Morales with We the People. Welcome back to We the People. I am Roy Morales with candidate for sheriff Carl Pittman. Carl, we were just talking about illegal immigration and about conditions where an individual stop. As most people know, I am not for profiling, and I'm sure you're not either. But when someone breaks the law and they're pulled over for speeding, broken tail light, swerving at 2 o'clock in the morning, we want to pull them over, and we're going to ask them, you know, driver's license, registration, and insurance, like you're supposed to. And we need to get those cars off the road if the documentation isn't right. Towing. The Towing Association and their industry is willing to tow. They're willing to help. As you know, truck drivers are always there for peace officers to protect them in case there's an accident. They always pull in right behind to protect the officer and the vehicle that stopped. I hear that next week they will be endorsing Carl Pittman for sheriff. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm very, very pleased to hear that. Last year, my campaign sent a letter out to all of the registered tow truck drivers in this county. And one of the things that we touched on was the fact that, you know, tow truck operators, and there's other industries also that I consider collateral partners of the sheriff's office, whether it's the bail bond industry, whether it is even defense counsel. You know, we're all in this thing, and when everybody's doing their job well, it just works better. But it is important to me that when a motorist here in Harris County is on the roadway, you should be as safe as we can possibly make you. And one of the things that we can absolutely do is when we encounter someone with no driver's license, no registration, no proof of insurance, and there is not another licensed vehicle or licensed occupant in that vehicle, that car is going to be towed off the roadway. I think that is the absolute safe thing to do. Can you imagine if under what appears that the current sheriff is doing, having deputies write tickets to who? If you have no identification, who are we writing a citation to? And then we're going to let that vehicle go down the road. Can you imagine if a major accident happens after that point? Harris County is probably signed on for quite a bit of liability, and I think that's irresponsible.
Well, that's very important topic, and I know that if you're sheriff, you're going to take care of that problem. But another problem is the budget. You talk about on your website about having a zero-based budget policy.
Absolutely.
Tell us how you're going to achieve that.
Well, you know, when the sheriff comes in, the buck stops in the sheriff's office with me. And what we have to do is we have to look at every single expenditure that the sheriff's office is making. Nothing can be considered too small to look at. And so by doing that, we are going to find the wasteful spending. I'm going to cut the wasteful spending. We are working now on nearly a $400 million budget in the Harris County Sheriff's Office. That is a sizable, sizable budget. And the very fact that this sheriff has continued to ask for more and more money tells me, because I'm there every day to witness it, that we are not using our assets properly. And as Sheriff of Harris County, I will not waste your money. I absolutely will not. I think it's an irresponsible thing to do. And we will get down to the nuts and bolts of the sheriff's office. And that's what we have to do. That's responsible leadership.
Well, I appreciate that. I know you'll bring leadership to the office. We're going to take a short break. I'm Roy Morales with We the People. Welcome back to We the People. I'm Roy Morales with candidate for Harris County Sheriff, Carl Pittman. Carl, I want to talk about the relationship of the U.S. Constitution and the sheriff.
Well, I would submit to you that there is probably no office in this country, and particularly at the state level, at the local level, more important than the sheriff as it comes to protecting his or her county, protecting the Constitution. The sheriff has an absolute obligation to not enforce any law that impedes upon the Constitution. We've had a lot of things in the news, even dealing with TSA. We've had a lot of things in the news that the IRS, for example, the sheriff has the authority. If anyone is in his county and they are running afoul of the law, or they are violating the Constitution against the occupants of that county, the sheriff has an absolute duty to act. And I believe that that is the right way to do it, and that's what I'll do.
Well, actually, the Supreme Court has already spoken about this. What do you think about this case with Richard Mack versus the U.S., and the Supreme Court case that had to do with the Brady Bill?
Yes, that was Prince versus the United States government, in essence, out in Arizona. Sheriff Mack and the Sheriff Prenz, this was a situation where provisions of the Brady Bill, the federal government was attempting to force local law enforcement to enforce federal law. And the sheriff stood against that and ultimately prevailed at the U.S. Supreme Court. And I think that set a very good tone for every sheriff in this country. We have 254 sheriffs in Texas, and every one of them ought to study that and understand what their awesome power is, and they have to understand, of course, have the good sense of when to use it, but ultimately the sheriff needs to and better be its constitutional protector for his county.
Well, I think that was a very good precedence. Unfortunately, it was a 4-3 vote. It was very close.
Very close.
But it's there. And like you said, every sheriff should be using it because you are the highest elected official for public safety as a peace officer in that county. And because of that, I want to ask your opinion. What happened in Waco and David Koresh and the Branch Davidians, what would you have done?
Well, you know, one of the things I've talked about for a long time is common sense leadership. And with David Koresh going out into town and authorities having a warrant for his arrest, that seemed like a pretty simple solution to arrest the man when he left the compound. And I think that would have resulted in a clean arrest with no loss of life. Ultimately, you know, we had a situation where the sheriff of that county should have excused the federal officers from his county and dealt with that as he probably knew he should have. And I guarantee you, in studying I've done on it, in hindsight, that's what he wished that he had done.
Well, you know, being a sheriff, as you know, you could just go in and swear in and get you a posse and ask the federal government to leave. Absolutely.
And that's a power that too often, you know, law enforcement officials have become more and more dependent upon federal assistance. And it's okay to ask for federal assistance, and it's also okay to excuse them when it's time for them to go.
And I agree with that 100%. What do you think you can do to halt this invasion of privacy from the TSA?
Well, you know, my wife and I were traveling back into Houston last year, and we saw an elderly woman. You know, I've said I could see her slip. And I think back to my mother, and I surely wouldn't want her exposed in public the way I saw this woman exposed. You know, it would, as sheriff, it would, as any other criminal offense in Texas, is going to require a complainant, a willing complainant. And as the sheriff of this county, if we have a willing complainant and we have good probable cause to believe that a member of TSA has violated the law, that member of TSA will be an occupant of the Harris County Jail. Now, I'm sure a federal magistrate's going to have a problem with that, but we'll deal with that when we cross it, because the right thing to do, as always, is to enforce the law.
Well, I hope the next mayor of the city of Houston will work with you on this. I think I know one candidate that might.
Very good.
Now, I had another important question, and I never thought I would ask this question about my country. Will you protect us from the interference of the federal government in our daily lives?
Absolutely. You know, an oath I took a long time ago, first when I was 17 years old, was to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As a young man going into the United States Marine Corps, I always envisioned that the conflict was going to come on a foreign shore. But the truth of it is, we have some domestic enemies. And I pledge, as sheriff of this county, I will protect, I will stand up, and I will defend the Constitution to my last breath.
Very well said. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. I'm Roy Morales with We the People. Welcome back. I'm Roy Morales with We the People. And today I'm talking about the sheriff's race and with candidate Carl Pittman. Carl, I want to thank you for coming on our program today. One more time, why don't you tell the viewers what's your website?
My website is carlforsheriff.com. That's carlforsheriff.com.
Carl, thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for your service to your country, and I want to thank you for serving as a peace officer in the state of Texas.
Well, you're very welcome.
I want the viewers to remember that early voting starts May 14th and ends on May 25th. Election Day is May 29th. I'm Roy Morales from Houston, protecting and defending our Constitution and liberties. God bless Texas, and God bless America. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi. Thank you.